Good evening and welcome. My name is Dirk. Thank you for joining our live, interactive telephone town hall. We're hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia families, seniors, and the economy. As mentioned, this is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during this event. So if you have a question, you can press *3 on your phone keypad at any time. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll take down your name and where you're calling from. Then the next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call and able to ask your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting it through the portal below our online streaming player. That's at spanberger.house.gov/live. Now, if you've joined us on Facebook Live tonight and wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit the online streaming portal we just mentioned to submit your question. Again, that address is spanberger.house.gov/live. Also, if you'd like to receive updates from our office via email, please press *6 on your phone keypad at any time, and an operator will collect your email address. Now, often we receive a lot of questions during our live event. So if we're not able to address your question this evening, please call our district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours. Remember, if you have any questions during this event, please press *3 on your telephone keypad or type your question right below the streaming player. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome Congresswoman Spanberger to the event. Congresswoman, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. I'm Abigail Spanberger, and I am honored to serve Virginia's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. To all the parents on the line, I hope that back-to-school season is going well, and whether this town hall is your first or your 15th time joining us, we're happy to have you on the line, and I hope you find tonight's conversation informative. As we approach the end of the month, I am working here on Capitol Hill to make sure we avoid a government shutdown and protect Virginia's economy. And before we go into questions, I just want to run through a couple updates. If you've been watching my work for Virginia, you know that I have prioritized expanding high-speed broadband internet connections and access since my very first days in office. And just last week, I was proud to celebrate faster internet coming to some of our neighbors in Madison County. In Madison, I joined representatives from Firefly, the Central Virginia Electric Co-op, and Rappahannock Electric Co-op to announce this new broadband internet access that is coming for hundreds of customers across Madison County. And this project was made possible through funding from really important and responsible investments in our infrastructure, including dollars from the American Rescue Plan. This is the kind of progress that we can see, that we can make possible when we work together, when federal, state, and local officials work with the business community and community members to deliver real results. I also want to share an update on an effort that many of you are closely tracking. Right now, I am leading the charge to force a vote on our bipartisan Social Security Fairness Act. This legislation would eliminate the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, two provisions that reduce the retirement Social Security benefits, earned Social Security benefits of retired police officers, federal employees, firefighters, teachers, and other public servants. These provisions impact more than 2.5 million Americans. These Americans, our friends, our neighbors, so many of my constituents have waited long enough for a fix. And that's why we are bringing together Democrats and Republicans to do just that. Over the last week, and the update when we left the floor was 206. I'll just double check the number. I've been working and tracking this very closely with Republican Congressman Garrett Graves, and confirming we are at 206. We need 218 to force a vote on the floor, and so we have been actively working to get that number up. We were at 188 yesterday, so we were hustling around whipping votes today, and it's or signatures. It's exciting. At 218 members who signed this discharge petition, that's when we would be able to force a vote on the floor. So we're going to keep pressing and keep bringing people together to make sure that we can get this bill not just to the House floor, but to the Senate and ultimately to the president's desk. And finally, I just want to make one plug for the services that are offered by my office. If you, a loved one, a neighbor, have an issue with any federal agency like the VA or the IRS, we are here to help. So please do not hesitate to contact us, 703-987-2180, or go online at spanberger.house.gov. And with that, I appreciate you all joining us this evening, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, another quick reminder, if you have a question you would like to ask Congresswoman Spanberger, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. And if you're online at spanberger.house.gov/live, right below the streaming portal, you will see a place for your name and your question. You can type in and get that to us as well during this live telephone town hall. So let's go get to our first caller. And we're joined by James. Hi, James. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's your question?
Yes, good evening, Congresswoman. I have two real quick questions. I saw that the postal employees are going to be allowed to sign up for Medicare B without a penalty. What are the possibilities that you would consider that to extend to all government retirees who don't have Medicare B? And the last question is, how confident are you that H.R. 82 will pass in this session of Congress? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for restraining the questions. So let me begin with the H.R. 82 question. This is the WEP and GPO bill that I just mentioned. And this is a bill that we've introduced. We have more than 326 co-sponsors, I think was the final, last time I checked, number. It's a bipartisan bill that would repeal the WEP and the GPO, which unfairly and incorrectly reduces the earned benefits that retired federal employees, police officers, teachers, firefighters, list goes on and on of public servants face. So I will say this, I am cautiously optimistic. We are further than we have ever been before, both in terms of co-sponsors, but also in our coordinated effort on the House floor with the discharge petition. Even though we have easily 218 people supporting the bill, who, if it were brought to a vote, would easily vote for it, even though we have more than what's needed for what's called the suspension calendar. So when there's reduced debate, that threshold's 290. We still haven't been able to get the majority to commit to bringing it to the floor, and which is why I am working with Garrett Graves, Republican member of Congress. Republicans are currently in the majority, who we did this bipartisan effort. With 206 signatures, we have to get to 218. With 218 votes, we can force it to the floor. Now, there are some little asterisks around here where potentially there could be some hijinks along the way, and what we wrote the discharge petition in order to avoid it going to committee. We've been working with FOP and IAFF and teachers associations from across the country, and NARF, and all these coalition groups who have been extraordinary in advocating for not only people to co-sponsor the bill, but ultimately to sign it, the discharge petition. We're doing a big press conference tomorrow. And so to get to the very basic element of your question, if we can get to 218 tomorrow, that ideally will put us on a path to being able to pass this bill in the House and give the Senate enough time for them to also pass it. Importantly, we finally have enough co-sponsors on the bill in the Senate that we can move it through and within the parameters of the filibuster. So we have more than 60, which is extraordinarily important. That's new for us to exceed that 60 vote threshold in co-sponsors. So I will celebrate when we've actually done it, but we have been more successful thus far than we have in the past. We've had more people join us in our efforts than we have in the past. So all the signs are good. But I'm going to hold my excitement to the day when we actually watch the president sign it into law. As for the postal employees signing up for Medicare without a penalty, I'm gonna dig into this one and see if there's any efforts legislatively of an equivalent type that may exist, because that's just not something. I'm not aware of any other efforts. This would have been done under the Postal Service Reform Act that did allow for that special enrollment period. I voted for it. I think it was an important bill. But to my knowledge, there's no efforts to create additional special enrollment periods for other categories of federal employees. But I'll double check on that one, and we can follow up. If James, if you gave us your contact information, we can follow up on that. But this bill was based on some real needs to kind of create changes and reforms within the Postal Service. So we'll follow up if we see anything changing on that, or if there's any legislative efforts. But I think this one, at least in terms of the work that we did on it, was specific to the uniqueness of the Postal Service.
All right, Congresswoman, if you're ready to move on, I've got Anna on the line with us. Hello, Anna. You are live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's your question? Hello, Anna.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you,
Hi.
Representative. Hi. Thank you for allowing me to ask you a question. I have a question regarding school violence. Just for purposes of background, I'm a guardian ad litem for children in this area, and also prior to that, I served as a deputy for a local social services department serving a level 3 area. We have seen an uptick in school violence and predominantly an uptick in threats for mass shootings and those types of things. Here in Spotsylvania County, within the last week, we've had two separate incidences of threats to assault children at the school coming from within the school. So my question for you, Ms. Spanberger, is what do you see as the problem, and what is your proposed potential solution that's specific to Virginia?
Yeah, Anna, thank you so much for this question, and certainly thank you for your work as a guardian ad litem and working in social services. You mentioned the circumstances in Spotsylvania County. Even just over the past week, we've seen within the 7th District threats in Woodbridge, in Stafford, in Orange. A 6-year-old had a gun in his backpack in Stafford.
I serve all of those localities.
And so you're aware of the challenges that our educators are facing, the fears that parents are facing, and the efforts that they are undertaking to keep our kids safe. And so, in addition to being a legislator, I'm also a parent. I've got 3 school-age daughters, and like so many parents, every time there is a news headline, even in these circumstances where someone was arrested or they got ahead of any potential threat, it is still fear-inducing, and it is still terrifying. And from a policy standpoint, I'll go back to what we have done and what else needs to be done. So we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. We passed that last Congress. That bill has federal funding for violence prevention initiatives across our communities, for efforts to contend with behavioral health challenges that might impact circumstances in young kids in school who are facing behavioral health challenges. I've led efforts to expand access to telehealth resources on the behavioral health side. But importantly, in Virginia, we have seen some strong progress in some of the gun violence prevention legislation. And so I was just a co-sponsor of a package of reforms at the federal level to include bills related to safe storage and parental responsibility when an underage individual or kid who is known to be a potential risk or is able to gain access to a firearm. And while these legislative efforts have gone into place in Virginia, our effort here on Capitol Hill is to ensure that from a federal perspective, those same bills that pass through the General Assembly in Virginia, we can pass at the federal level. But beyond that, I began in politics working gun violence prevention issues as a volunteer with Moms Demand Action. I'm also a former federal agent. I used to carry a firearm every single day. And from a legislative perspective, there is much more we can be doing to keep our community safe. And it's everything from passing a background check bill that standardizes, and it's the universal background check bill. So if you go to a federally licensed point of sale, you undergo a background check. But there are loopholes in that system that allow those who are prohibited buyers from being able to buy a firearm. And so closing those loopholes is important. There's a thing called the Charleston loophole where if a background check does not come back with a response, the default is to permit that purchase of a firearm. The Charleston loophole is called the Charleston loophole because the man who murdered churchgoers in Charleston at a Bible study purchased his firearm after his background check wasn't returned within the constraints of the law. He was allowed to purchase that firearm, and then he attended that Bible study and murdered those church congregants. Extending that time frame out to 10 days where that background check can be processed is extraordinarily important, particularly when people might have a common name or when they might move frequently. Still, it protects that due process, just extending that time in that circumstance. Another bill that I've supported, that I have voted for on the House floor, and that received bipartisan support, is a bill that would limit magazine capacity for firearms. Another bill that would raise the age for purchasing rifles. So AR-15s, one can purchase at 18. And handguns, the age is 21. Now, this is a holdover from a law in the 60s that established the 21-year-old purchasing timeframe for a handgun. And at the time, a rifle, according to the letter of the law, was different. Rifle of then is not the AR-15 of today. And so there's been a bipartisan effort to try and raise the age for parity with a handgun. And I voted for that. It's passed the House floor, but we weren't able to get it passed in the Senate. And of course, a production stoppage on assault-style rifles is something that also has received bipartisan support when we voted on it in the House of Representatives, though it has not been able to move forward into the Senate. So I thank you for your work. I thank you for your question. All of the legislative priorities and bills, frankly, that we have been working on would make a significant impact in saving lives. And the bills that we have passed, in particular the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, is a step in the right direction. It's one that I am proud of, it's been signed into law, but there is so much more to do. So thank you so very much for the question.
It was a quick reminder, this is an interactive forum, and we would love to hear from you. If you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. And if you're online at spanberger.house.gov/live, right below the streaming portal, you'll see a place you can type in your name and your question. We've got certainly more questions lined up. We've got Lita joining us now. Lita, welcome. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's on your mind?
Okay. Good evening, Congresswoman Spanberger. How are you?
Good evening. I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. I have two quick questions. My first question is, food is being recalled on on a daily basis, and I'm wondering, what is Congress going to do to ensure the safety of food and how it relates to the FDA? My second question is, another government shutdown is looming. What is Congress going to do to avoid another shutdown and avoid future shutdowns, later on? And this is something that occurs every year with the government shutdown.
Yeah. Lita, thank you for the question. The first answer on the food safety, I think it is alarming when we hear about recalls. It is alarming to hear issues related to listeria in meat or in other circumstances, E. coli in produce. But the reality is that the system is working in identifying, tracing, and then recalling. And so importantly, for those who are listening, the source of the contaminated meat has been found. The recall has been issued. If anyone does have, in this case, it's boar's head in your refrigerator, make sure to check online to make sure that meat isn't impacted by the recall, though better safe than sorry. And certainly food being sold in the grocery store, or in this case, this meat being sold in the grocery store, is deemed to be safe. And so the system, once there is an issue detected, the system of tracking it, isolating it, and protecting people is clear. But I think there is definitely more that can be done proactively to ensure the cleanliness of meat processing facilities, as was the case as it related to the contaminated meat, or addressing other concerns that might exist in food handling systems. So it's important that we have a system that identifies quickly, can track food quickly, and make the public aware quickly, though it is alarming every time that it does happen. More regular and aggressive inspections, particularly as it relates to meat processing locations, is really an important element, particularly as it relates to this issue of contaminated meat. Now, as it pertains to the government shutdown, the most basic and direct answer to your question is Speaker Johnson must bring a continuing resolution to the House floor that is a continuing resolution through the end of this year, so that when Congress adjourns at the end of this year and a new Congress is sworn in next year, that they are not entering in an in-between time with a holdover potential continuing resolution, or that they cannot enter in a potential government shutdown. Shutdowns are bad for Virginia. They're bad for our economy. They're bad for Virginians. We are the most impacted state when there is a government shutdown, and it's not just federal employees. It's contractors, it's community members, it's small business owners, it's restaurant owners. It is everyone, and it is an extraordinary challenge, not just when we face a shutdown, but Lita, as you mentioned, when there's always a threat looming of a potential shutdown. So the speaker needs to bring a continuing resolution tomorrow. If he brings it tomorrow, it will pass. And then we can move it to the Senate and send it to the president's desk. It's his responsibility. And unfortunately, every time that we've had this brinksmanship, it's because we've had a speaker unwilling to bring the continuing resolution or the appropriations bills to a vote. It's why I entered the government as a representative under a government shutdown. And since then Speaker McCarthy and now Speaker Johnson have taken over, that we've been on the brink of a government shutdown essentially every time there's a need for a federal funding bill to be brought to the floor and ultimately passed. So when he brings that continuing resolution, it will pass and we'll send it to the Senate, but that's what needs to happen. Thank you for this question.
So for everybody on the line with us, don't forget, you can get signed up to receive the Congresswoman's e-newsletter by pressing *6 right now on your telephone keypad. Again, stay informed, stay in touch with what the Congresswoman is doing for you with her e-newsletter. Simply press *6 to get enrolled. Next up, we've got Iantha. joining us now. Iantha, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, Senator Hyde, thank you. My question is concerning my mom, who is now deceased. IRS keeps sending me notices that she owes from 2019, and I filed her 2019 taxes in 2020. And we talk about this has been 5 years now, and I'm sending the same information. I think I've sent it 7 times. What is going on with IRS that they're not receiving this information? Because I made sure everything was paid.
Yeah. Well, let me begin by saying that I'm so sorry for the loss of your mother, and I know that when you're mourning her, the last thing that you should be dealing with or need to deal with is letters from the IRS. Yeah. Well, so let me walk you through what the process would be here. This is a circumstance where my office need to get a bit more information about you and about your mom. And so what I can tell you is I'm not going to make excuses at all for the IRS. You should not be getting letter after letter for your late mother and for her related to her taxes. I'm so sorry that this is happening to you. And in my office, one of the many services that we provide for constituents is supporting you all as you might be facing impacts and troubles with federal agencies, including the IRS. We've actually helped return more than $40 million to constituents so far since I was first sworn in. So I want to just thank you for speaking so openly about something that's really challenging and painful for you. And I want to let you know that my team will follow up with you directly so that we can get the information specific to your circumstance. We can open an inquiry for you. We can be in touch with the IRS for you. And we can work with you to find out what is happening so that we put a stop to this and you can go about mourning and remembering your mother properly without getting all of these letters from IRS. If anyone else is facing anything similar, please be in touch with our office so that we can begin to provide support and do an inquiry on your behalf.
All right, Congresswoman, we've got a question submitted online by Susanna. She states, I have a big issue now with the USPS. I've already been in touch with your office. My concern is what is being done to ensure the timely delivery of ballots during the election, and when can DJOY be removed?
Susanna, thank you for this question. Members of the Virginia delegation, Senator Kaine, Senator Warner, I think Congressman Whitman, Congresswoman McClellan, we all joined together, and if I forgot someone who was there, my apologies, but over time, the entirety of our delegation, Democrats and Republicans, have engaged with the Postal Service in a coordinated and cooperative fashion because the challenges our constituents are facing with the delay of their mail is inexcusable at this point. In those conversations with folks from the Postal Service, including Postmaster DeJoy, they provided us with data showing that they are certainly moving in the right direction. The improvements that they are making appear to be sustained. And so I will express my hopefulness that continues. And we were very clear with them in this last meeting that in advance of early voting in Virginia, our worry was any delay to the receipt or the sending back of mail would need they need to be attuned to the fact that, particularly in Virginia, with early voting beginning on Friday, that we will not be able to accept any delays in the mail, particularly when something so important as ballots are in the mail. So please, if you are voting by mail, send those back early. As it relates to any changes with the Postmaster General, changes to who is the Postmaster General, President Biden nominated 2 individuals for the remaining 2 vacancies on the Board of Governors for the Postal Service. That's the entity that would make decisions related to overall leadership, and the Senate needs to confirm those folks. And then those folks could take action related to how they think the Postal Service should be led into the future, and whether that would mean a change in the Postmaster General. The next action there it lies with the United States Senate at the moment.
So this is a live, interactive forum with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, and she would love to answer your question. If you've got a question you're thinking about, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, get involved in tonight's discussion. Please press *3 to ask a question. Next up, we've got Robert joining us. Hi, Robert. You are live with the Congresswoman. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good evening, Congresswoman Spanberger.
Good evening.
The question I have, I guess, is more generalized and is maybe relevant to the district, but beyond. There's been a lot of discussion around immigration policy, given that this is a presidential election year. And frankly, there's been, I think, some fairly crazy stories that have come out of this. It's my understanding, and I'm hopeful that you can maybe confirm or set straight, that policy for immigration in the United States is actually the responsibility or the job of Congress. And I'm wondering if I believe that is the case. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit and maybe give us some idea of why this is being so much cast as a presidential responsibility.
That's an excellent question, Robert, because the only actions that a president can take as it pertains to immigration are some of the types of actions that we've seen President Biden take with making changes and certain restrictions related to the border, related to the temporary protected status. Really, those are just some efforts around the edges. We have an immigration system that is outdated, that is no longer working, that has not evolved or been updated or been changed as our country's needs have changed. Brief example, we need far more H-2A visas. So those are the visas that permit hardworking folks who want to come and work in support of Virginia agriculture to be able to come here. So farmers and producers can bring great hardworking people in. They can do it legally. They can apply to the program, and they can have that support come work on their farm for a season, go back home, and then come back. It's a program that's extraordinarily important to agriculture, certainly in Virginia and across the country. But we have not made any meaningful changes to the number of H-2A visas that are available in our country, which means that over time, that program is overstretched. Farmers cannot get the support and the workers that they need, that they would want to bring in legally. And the system is not working. And that's just one small piece of it. That's the agriculture example, right? Seasonal workers and the folks who come and work at water parks over the summer or lifeguards at the beach. These are the sorts of programs that just, they need to be adjusted. I have worked on legislation because, frankly, there are far too many individuals who come to the United States, who go to American medical schools, who want to stay in the United States, who want to serve communities. And when we have a shortage of medical providers, particularly doctors, particularly of some specialties, nurses, let alone home healthcare aides and CNAs, the idea that someone who might come to the United States, educated here, studied here, and then would be sent back home when their services and what they went to school for are needed here is, I think, a signal that the process is broken. And if any element of the entire thing is necessary to view how broken it is, it's the fact that continually people endeavor to enter the country without legal status because the process by which one can come here legally it's broken, it's backlogged. Employers are hiring people without legal status, and people are coming here to try and work. The border security provisions that we must pass, there's extraordinary opportunities to utilize top-rate technology and how we are doing detection of illicit items coming across the border, be it drugs, be it guns. And yet we are not, Congress, are not engaging in the comprehensive reforms that would provide Border Patrol and our law enforcement with the most up-to-date technologies that they could leverage to keep our, not just our border, but our community safe, particularly as we see the influx of fentanyl, among other types of drugs, into our communities. And so, Robert, I know I've really just gone into how the problem is a challenge, but it is up to Congress to write the laws. It is up to Congress, the United States House of Representatives, and the United States Senate to pass laws and send them to the president's desk. And notably, President Biden and Vice President Harris engaged aggressively with a bipartisan group of senators in the United States Senate, came together and said, we need immigration reform, we need border security improvements. Go to the table, please work something out. After months and months and months, this bipartisan group came together and they pushed out legislation, not just an idea, not just a thought that they had, but actual brass tacks. This is what we are putting forward. And it was an aggressive plan to take control of a broken immigration system that isn't working for anyone, and to take control of an antiquated border security infrastructure that certainly isn't fair to the men and women tasked with keeping our border secure, and isn't fair to communities across our country who just want it to be working. And unfortunately, when this bill was discussed and announced, and it was clear that, oh my goodness, this bipartisan group of people had come together and they agreed, and this bill had a path in the Senate. It was at that time that former President Trump announced his opposition to this bill. And at that time, it's when Speaker Johnson said that if the Senate passed the bill, they wouldn't even bring it up for a vote in the House. And so for those of us who have focused on security issues, border security issues, immigration reform, and I've had border security related bills trying to keep cartels from trafficking guns and trafficking drugs and fentanyl in particular across our border. I've had bills signed into law by former President Trump, by President Biden. But it's not enough. It needs to be a full, comprehensive effort, which is what this was until it was undone by the former president. And so what I am so sad to report, because I think it's a disservice to the American people, is there are some people in politics who would rather talk about the problem of our broken immigration system or talk about the problem of our antiquated border security infrastructure than actually solve it. But there are people who are working, who want to get to a point where we can bring a bill forward. And notably, Vice President Harris has said she, into the future, if ever the one with that president's pen, would sign it. And so it is incumbent on every member of Congress and every senator who would have voted for that bill to make sure that at no point in time do we lose sight of the fact that months and months of negotiations ended and resulted in a bill that would make monumental changes and improvements. It certainly isn't the bill I would write if I were, just writing it by myself, because it is an example of actual negotiation. And that's the reason that it must be passed. And unfortunately, it won't be this Congress. But my hope is that next January, as soon as the 119th Congress is sworn in, that we'll see movement on this bill. So thank you for asking the question and allowing me a little bit of a rant on this issue. But it's such a serious one, and it's unfortunately one that sometimes just gets relegated to the talking points and the politics. and there's lives and public safety, and frankly, our community that is impacted because of the inaction that we have seen.
We encourage you during this live event to get signed up to receive the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, and it's very simple to do. Simply press *6 on your telephone keypad to get yourself signed up. Again, the Congresswoman and her staff put out a very informative e-newsletter. You can get it by pressing *6 right now during this live interactive forum. You can also ask a question by pressing *3. So if you want to ask the Congresswoman a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. We've got a question that came in online from Janine, and she asks, Congresswoman, can you please help advance both the NAPA Reauthorization Act and the Alzheimer's Accountability and Investment Act, and urge House leadership to bring these bills to a vote on the House floor?
Janine, thank you for asking this question. For anyone listening, the NAPA Reauthorization Act, that one would create a national strategic plan to address Alzheimer's. And then the Alzheimer's Accountability and Investment Act is obviously related to the disease as well. I support both of these bills. I will vote in favor of these bills, and I will continue to advocate for both of them to be brought forward for a vote. Far too many families across Virginia are impacted by Alzheimer's, and I have spoken with so many families who devote themselves to ensuring that resources and research and the ability to impact future generations are clear, and they do it in their loved one's honor. And it is in that spirit of dedication to other folks that I will continue to advocate for these bills to be brought forward. And when they are, I will vote for them.
So a moment ago, I mentioned that we've got a question from online, but I didn't give people the address. If you're at spanberger.house.gov/live, that's where you can find a place to type your name and question right below the streaming player. Now let's go ahead and get out to Bonita. Bonita, you are live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What is your question?
Oh, thank you so much. Good evening, Congresswoman Spanberger. I hope you are well. I actually met with Lucy in your office yesterday, and I wanted to personally say, since I'm on this call this evening, thank you to her for her time, but also a special thank you to you for co-sponsoring MCED. I met with her on a couple of requests regarding funding for cancer research and prevention, and then, of course, support on the MCED, which I know that you support, because early screening for cancer is so important. When detected at later stages, treatments are more limited and outcomes are generally just overall poorer. So I did want to thank you for co-sponsoring HR 2407 and ask if you think that are you confident that this will pass, that HR 2407 pass before the ending of the 118th Congress?
So, Bonita, thank you for the kind words about Lucy and my team. And thank you for your advocacy related to cancer research and cancer screening. So this bill, for others who are listening, would allow for Medicare to cover blood-based MCED tests, which is an important diagnostic tool. It is a bipartisan bill. It is led by a Republican from Texas, and it has Democrats and Republicans supporting it. It is a straightforward, very clear priority piece of legislation. It ultimately, early detection is also cost savings. And so while it's extraordinarily important as it relates to outcomes, it's also, early detection is also extraordinarily important in mitigating the types of treatments that one might need or the interventions that one might need. And it is better for the patient experience, but also in the long run, an investment in early detection within Medicare is ultimately to the benefit the larger program. So I cannot necessarily. I don't want to place a bet on how quickly I think this one will move forward, but I will say, as a bipartisan bill that has clear benefit to communities across the country, and ultimately is both extraordinarily important to saving lives and also prioritizing prevention rather than reaction. My hope is that this bill could move forward, and certainly I'll continue to advocate that it does. And I'll connect with Jody Arrington to see what progress he's made there. But thank you for your advocacy, and I'm proud to support it.
Next up, we've got a question from Jim. Jim, welcome to the call. Appreciate your patience in holding. You are live with the Congresswoman. Go ahead now.
Congresswoman Spanberger, I have a question. How are you, sir? I have a question. I have a son. I live in Woodbridge, Prince William County, and I have a son that lives in New York. And when I go up to visit or go up to that area, I take Amtrak. And there's a station in Woodbridge, an Amtrak station. And if I come back, or when I come back, if it's after dark, the lights aren't on. You know, the lights along the track and the light in the parking lot. So I wonder if there's any way they could leave those on. Just seems like it's a precarious situation.
That does
lights
sound.
Are off after dark.
And so you're saying like right there at the station?
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. Jim, I don't know the answer to that question, and it is one that I will dig into. It seems like a pretty straightforward safety issue, so I'll follow up with my counterparts at the county, see whose jurisdiction it is, and if it's not the county, then I'll follow up with Amtrak, and I'll make sure my team has your contact information too, because we'll let you know what the resolution on that one is. But particularly as it's starting to get darker and darker, earlier and earlier, this seems like a pretty straightforward way to ensure that people are safe, at least when they're getting on and off the trains and heading to the parking lot. I've never received this question before, so I look forward to getting you an answer.
All right, next we're joined by Carolyn, who's got a question. Hi, Carolyn. You're live with Congresswoman Spanberger. What's on your mind?
Hi, Ms. Spanberger. I appreciate you taking my call. And my question is, you said something earlier about the news, what do you call it? That you were going to have a news thing doing something tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
HR 82?
Yes.
And is that going to be a local news conference? Is it going to be something that would involve state news agencies, or?
That will be. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure how many representatives in Virginia are on board with this. I mean, I looked on the list, but I know there are a couple that aren't there.
Well, Carolyn, the good thing is we don't need everybody. We've got more than 300. I think the current number is 326 people who've co-sponsored across the country. So, and we've got 206 on the discharge petition, and ultimately we need 218 to vote for it to pass. So we don't need everybody. You are right. We certainly don't have every Virginian, but we do have a lot of Virginians. And the press conference tomorrow is going to be a press conference focused on the discharge petition efforts, where we are, how many signatures we have. We'll be hearing from advocates from across the country. And so the audience on this is really to ensure that communities across the country, there will be some national news outlets there, will hear about this effort. And, when I am speaking, I will be talking about what this means for Virginia, what it means for retirees, and why we need to get this bill across the finish line. We haven't, it's been decades that retirees have been impacted by the WEP and GPO. We've never been this close. And so the purpose of this is to continue to make sure that we are both pushing messages out to our communities, of course, in my case, Virginia, my co-lead, Garrett Graves, in his case, Louisiana, but across the country, so people know that we are closer than we've ever been to getting this bill across the finish line. If we have a couple more Virginians who choose to join us, I welcome that completely. But so far, we have every member of every Democrat in the House of Representatives has signed the discharge petition so far, and so that's a good chunk. And we do have bipartisan support from our Virginia delegation on the bill itself. So we'll continue to work it and try and make sure that the coalition is broad. But right now, it's broader than it's ever been, and the numbers are certainly there to pass it.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Next caller with a question, we've got Mike joining us. Hi, Mike. You are live on the call. What is your question?
Hey, good evening. Thank you for taking the call. Abigail, I'm in Chesterfield, and we miss you. We know that those folks in District 7 are enjoying it so much. My question to you is about the redistricting. Would love to know more about, is there any other redistricting planned in Virginia? What are you hearing on that? Obviously, there's concerns, not only our selfish concern about losing you as our district rep, but things about like voting rights and gerrymandering and those kinds of things. Those are pretty key. Just wanting to know what your opinions are and if you know of anything else going on in terms of redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you for this question, Mike. And for those on the line, Chesterfield was previously in the 7th District, and I previously represented a great group of constituents across Chesterfield County, and in redistricting back in 2021. So before this term of Congress, they were districted, some of my former constituents over to District 4 and some over to District 1. But Mike, to talk a little bit more about redistricting, there is no anticipated redistricting that would occur in Virginia again until 2031, after a 2030 census, or right after the 2030 census. There have been cases, in fact, the 4th District, a number of years ago, between the census, between the 2010 and 2020 census, it was deemed that district was challenged on the basis of constitutionality, and it was deemed necessary to change the lines of the 4th District. When that occurred, and that would have been after the 2014 election and in advance of the 2016, I believe. Yeah, that's correct. Then that impacted neighboring districts, including a slight change to the 7th at that time. But there are no current lawsuits or any challenges to current districts in Virginia, either at the state level or at the federal level that I'm aware of. And so the census that occurs in 2030 will once again look at population, and there will be a redistricting after that to reapportion. But I am sorry to say that at least until the next decade, you will not be in the 7th District. Lucky number 7 is a great district. I have been proud to represent it, and grateful to all of my constituents. But no, in terms of other issues related to voting, certainly at the state level, we have really important provisions to allow for 45 days of early voting. So we can vote as of this Friday in person. So whatever locality you live in, your registrar's office will begin early voting as of this Friday. And then on the Virginia elections page. That page will provide additional information about secondary, tertiary, and additional voting locations for early voting. And so please, just a reminder, whoever it is you choose to vote for, and please be sure to cast your ballot and remember that you can cast your ballot as early as this coming Friday. But thank you for the kind words, Mike, and I appreciate you still tuning in.
So, Congresswoman, looking at the clock, it looks like we begin to wrap up now. But before we close out, I want to make sure that I give you a few moments for some closing thoughts to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who called in. Thank you for bearing with me as I had some technical difficulties and then ended up switching cameras. So I apologize that it's a little grainy for those who are watching online. For those who have dialed in, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Once again, I think this is pretty indicative of the types of questions that are on people's mind, everything from weapon GPO, which in fairness, I've been talking about constantly. So perhaps that is both constituents and I have been in part leading the way on making sure that that's top of mind for people across the 7th. But cancer research and preventative care and identification and research funding for Alzheimer's and focus on voting and challenges within our communities, whether it's gun violence or a lack of street lamps in trafficked areas and train stations. The breadth and the scope of things that we've talked about today, I think, speaks to the types of things that are on people's minds. So thank you so much for all of your questions. As we had one question this evening that was very specific to a casework issue, I just want to remind everyone that we have surpassed more than $40 million returned to constituents, and that's tax returns that constituents were having trouble getting filed on their own. That's various different OPM support. Those are veterans benefits. The list goes on. So if you are having any challenges with a federal agency, the VA, Social Security, Medicare, OPM, please know that we are here to help. We cannot dictate what the outcome is, but we can be there right along with you, file an inquiry, and dig into the situation on your behalf. And that's what we love to do, and we've been pretty successful at it. So please be in touch with my office. Please go to my website, spanberger.house.gov. And thank you very much for the honor of representing you. It will be a busy week on Capitol Hill, and I will be focused on making sure that by the end of next week, when it is that Congress is supposed to end for the month of September, that's next Thursday, that we have passed a continuing resolution and that no person, no business owner, no contractor, no federal employee, no one is facing the fear of losing a paycheck or losing business or not knowing when in fact they might see a shift and see the government funded. So we have to do it by the end of next week. We will, and I will continue to hammer home the horrifying impact on Virginia, Virginians, and our economy when there is a potential, even just a potential for a shutdown. So thank you so very much for tuning in. I hope everyone has a safe evening. And again, please be in touch with my office if we can help you or answer any questions. Thanks so much, everyone.
So as mentioned, we are coming to the end of our live event. Join us for this important Virginia-focused telephone town hall with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. We truly appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, but if we weren't able to get to your question this evening, you can call our district office during normal business hours at 703-987-2180. Again, that's 703-987-2180. Or you can go to spanberger.house.gov. Thanks again for your time. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night, everyone.